Mic working?
Mic is working. Let me turn the video on.
All right, good morning. My name is Steve Marr, and welcome to Risk Management Professionals continuing a webinar series to display tips associated with our background in SVAs, urban water management plans, PSM, and RMP activities. We use this as an opportunity to outreach our technology and provide a service to folks who are either trying to work with contractors or do it themselves with respect to a variety of the technical areas that we as an engineering consultancy get involved in. Today's presentation is going to be on providing tips on urban water management plans. But before we get into that, let me go ahead and give you a little bit of background in terms of what we're doing here technically. This is a webinar using a WebEx interface. It's got full capabilities for two-way video and audio, but for this presentation portion, the audio on your end is going to be muted so that other people who are trying to listen don't hear you instead of the speaker. At the very end of the presentation, there'll be an opportunity for question and answer, and we can unmute you, or you can use the chat window interface to pose a question to our webcast producer, Nicole Otramba. Also, during the presentation, that same chat window can be used to identify problems, anything you need to communicate with the webcast producer for, and if you think an important point needs to be interjected in the presentation, don't hesitate. Everybody's trying to benefit from insights that we've gleaned from our years of working on urban water management plans, and you probably have a lot of key points to share also. Also, if you're having troubles, please don't hesitate to call in. Our main number is 949-282-0123. That's 949-282-0123. And at any time, if you're having technical difficulties or you need to talk to a person, please feel free to call in. So without further... Okay, sure. The little video box on your screen, if you'd like to adjust it to expand that a little bit, just grab the corner with your mouse and pull it out, and it's fully adjustable on your end. Thank you, Nicole. So anyway, without further ado, let me introduce the speakers. The two main speakers today are going to be George Long and Kristen Norton. George has a bachelor's in chemical engineering and a master's in biomedical engineering, and he's playing a very important role for the 2010-2011 Urban Water Management Plan updates. Kristen Norton, bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, is one of our senior staff. She's been involved in urban water management plans for the last few cycles, and as we'll be working with George to share a lot of tips today on urban water management plans. And so let me get George started. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve, for the introduction. My name is George Long, and I'll be doing an overview of your 2010 Urban Water Management Plan updates. And also, if you do come up with any questions throughout your updates, feel free to contact either me or Kristen. We'll be happy to help by either calling us at our extensions or sending us an email. So just some quick background information on the Urban Water Management Planning Act. Any urban water supplier with more than 3,000 customers or more than 3,000 acre-feet annually of distribution is required by the Act to develop these plans. And these plans give a good description of the water system as well as any water demands and supplies over the next 20 years to adequately account for droughts and any water conservation strategies such as the Water Conservation Bill of 2009. All right, so first thing I'm going to go through is the regulatory changes since 2005, how they affect the 2010 updates, and then up through 2020. And then I'll go through the different sections required by the new plans with a focus on what has changed since the 2005 plan. And so Governor Schwarzenegger, he produced a 20 by 220 water conservation plan, which requires a 20% reduction in per capita water use statewide by 2020, with the statewide gallons per capita day target of 154 And so these are also separated by hydrologic region to account for demographics and how the different areas use water. And so in 2009, the Water Conservation Bill, Senate Bill X7-7, provides a regulatory framework for this strategy. And so this is actually what changes the plan for 2010 based off of 2005. And in addition, similarly, the 1420 also determines eligibility of a water supplier's state grants or loans based on the implementation of their demand management measures. And demand management measures are, they're the same for the purpose of this presentation as best management practices for the CUWCC, so we'll use those interchangeably. And then also here is a picture of the different regions, and they also list the interim and target water use reduction strategies for 2020. So now, as far as the changes in the Urban Water Management Planning Act since 2005, based off of those regulations, you can see it's mostly the same. However, the main change is the baseline and target data that will need to be calculated for each retail supplier to meet their interim, which is 2015, and final per capita water use targets. The Act also requires some additional public notification that will affect the timeline of adopting your plan, as well as the from Assembly Bill 1420, all state grants and loans are determined based on the implementation of the DMMs or BMPs, among other minor changes. And so here's some key dates. As you can see right now in late February, the method 4 for determining your target water use has been released by DWR, and they are currently holding workshops throughout the state. And I believe those are located on their Urban Water Management Planning website. And also you can see the additional public notification. We have, before submitting the plan, it must be adopted at least 30 days prior to submission. So we have the STAR, the end of May, early June, if you want to meet the deadline of July 1st. And as well as before the hearing, there must be public notification 60 days before that hearing, and so that's why there's another STAR in late March, early April. So really, the plans are needed to be a draft given out before April 1st to meet the DWR's deadline of July 1st. All right, and so now I'll just go through the different sections for the 2010 update. And again, most of these will stay the same from 2005, so I'm going to focus on the baseline and target determination in Section 3. And then there's also 2 optional sections added on the end, Section 7 and Section 8, and we'll talk about those real briefly. Section 1, this is where the Act requires some agency coordination with neighboring water suppliers, maybe county agencies, any other public agencies that may be affected by your plan, by your conservation targets, should be notified. And if there's any questions on exactly whom you should notify, there is a table in the DWR's guidebook. And as always, to meet the minimum requirements of the Act, you could just make sure and hit every single column and row on that table. That's a good baseline there. And then, of course, the public participation with the 60-day notice prior to the hearing, and then the 30-day hearing before submittal. So the system description is pretty straightforward and can be used from the 2005 Urban Water Management Plan with any updates, including any growth or future water projects. And that'll describe the physical distribution area, attributes, any climate data for your region, as well as the population estimates out 20 years, so up to 2030. And those will be used for the water demands and water supply projections in the upcoming sections. Section 3, system demands, and that's where we see our water demands broken by sector. So we have residential, commercial, industrial, and institutional, landscape, wholesales, and then of course the baseline and target determination, which is from the Water Conservation Bill 2009, as well as water demand projections, and then water use reduction plan. And of course that's for wholesale water suppliers only. And so if we look at the baseline and target determination, DWR has provided methodologies in their guidebook for determining your retail water suppliers' baseline and urban water use targets. And so I'll briefly go through the steps that have been outlined by DWR to determine these targets. So step one, which is determining your baseline per capita water use. So that's a 10-year baseline period, which must be between 2005 and 2010. It must end between 2005 and 2010. And then if you meet a minimum threshold of recycled water use as a proportion of your total water use, then you're able to use a 15-year baseline period, which gives you a little more flexibility in calculating your current per capita water use consumption. And so once you determine your 10-year period, you calculate your gross water use, which is just that, the total water use for each of those years in that 10-year period. And that's specified in Methodology 1 of the guidebook. And then, of course, you calculate your service area population, which is in Methodology 2 of the guidebook, for each of your baseline years. And then the per capita water use is just your gross water use divided by your population for each year. And so once you have that, then to determine your target, this is where you hear about the different methods, and provisional method 4, which had been pending and was finally released. And provisional, it means not that they will change it before the plans are due this year, but in fact that it can be updated for the 2015 urban water management plans as they collect more statistical data. But method 1 is going to probably give you the most, it will probably be the hardest water use reduction to meet, as it's just taking your current baseline and multiplying it by 0.8. So a straight 20% reduction in your base daily per capita water use for 2020. Method 2 is based on performance standards broken up by sector. So you have indoor residential, CII, and landscape. And that is outlined, of course, in the technical methodologies in the guidebook. Method 3 is just 95% of the regional target, which this can be useful if you are somewhat at or near your regional target for base daily per capita water use currently, then your minimum reduction will be much lower compared to the other methods. Method 4 is also based on BMP estimates divided by sector, so you have indoor residential, landscape, and water losses, and then CII. And so we'll look a little bit at method 4, which is currently DWR is going over the methodology 4, having and hosting workshops and webinars. And so as you can see, here is their little diagram. You can see they have indoor residential savings, metering savings, CII, and landscape and water use loss savings. And so those are given on, they estimate based on BMPs implemented how much savings you will accrue. And then they give a default or a calculated estimate based on each of those. And so you can see that right there. And then once you've calculated your water use target and your baseline, then you can confirm that your water use target from step 2 meets the minimum threshold. The minimum threshold is you want to have a target at least 95%, at least a 5% reduction from your current baseline. And so that's determined by calculating a 5-year baseline instead of your 10-year. And the ending has to be between the end of 2007 and the 2010. And so you do the same steps as step 1, determining your per capita water use for those 5 years. And then you just multiply that by 0.95, and then you get your minimum threshold. So if step 2 has a higher water use than step 3, then you must increase your reduction or decrease your targets to meet step 3. If you're already below it, then you're okay, and you can move on to step 4, which is determining your interim water use target, which is what you have to meet for your 2015 plan, and that is just going to be half of your reduction from 2020. So if you have a 10% per capita reduction in 2020, then you'll need a 5% in 2015, and that's just taking your baseline per capita water use, adding it to your target, and dividing by 2. So section 4 is system supplies, and this you'll describe your groundwater, any transfer opportunities, if you have any opportunities for desalinated water, recycled water, or if there's any future water supply projects that you plan on constricting. Section 5 is water supply reliability and water shortage contingency planning, and that's pretty similar based off of the 2005 plan. Go into Section 6, demand management measures. This is where all 14 DMMs or BMPs must be reviewed, and a detailed description of each plan or of each measure must be put into the plan for anything being implemented or scheduled for implementation. And then for any DMMs not scheduled for implementation, you will have to describe and provide reasoning as to why they're not being planned for implementation. And that includes economic factors, non-economic, a cost-benefit analysis, any description of funding that may be available to implement these programs. And so also as far as state funding and grants from Assembly Bill 1420's regulation, if you do not have all 14 DMMs implemented, you will need to provide these reasonings as to why you have not implemented and why it is not locally effective in order to be eligible for your grant. So Section 7, climate change, and this is optional, and this covers any potential factors that may affect your water supply due to climate change. This includes mitigation, or as far as what you as a supplier can do to help prevent climate change, such as green programs. And so then Section 8, the completed checklists. Now this is also optional, but it's a good idea because it's kind of like giving yourself a self-audit. As you complete each section, you can make sure that you hit on every single point that the Act requires. And that way, if there's any questions as to, does this need to be done, I don't know exactly what I need to put in here, you can go through, make sure that everything is completed so that you'll have a plan that will be approved by DWI. And then something happened. Okay. And then finally, this is a side note. From the 2005 cycle, here are some statistics. 460 urban water suppliers were required to file 2005 plans. Of those, 34% did not submit a plan. Of the remaining, 31% were reviewed, and of those, 12% or 40 were deemed complete by DWI. So I'd like to thank you for listening, and does anyone have any questions?
I don't think we have any questions up this time. You can call us.
So feel free to give us a call, either me or Kristen Norton. And thank you for tuning in. I hope you had a great 3-day weekend. I know I did.
Yes, we did. Thank you.
Thank you.